Stardew Valley is one of the few games on Steam with the privilege of being given the overwhelmingly positive designation from the, well, overwhelmingly positive reviews. As someone who loves Terraria and even has a Terraria YouTube channel, Stardew Valley has been on my radar for quite a long time. The two games have two very similar audiences and Steam wouldn't stop recommending it to me, but I've resisted playing it until now. I did a blind run, I have some thoughts, so let's get into it. Now, the reason I resisted playing this game for the longest time is because it always looked like a farming game, and other than that, there wasn't much else to it. And after playing it, I can confidently say I was entirely right in my assessment. I am not a fan of farming games and tend to stick with those that have some sort of action, primarily combat. But will Stardew Valley change my mind about this genre of game? Well, to answer that question, let's talk about different parts of the game and my experience through them. And before I do, Stardew Valley doesn't really have a definite ending, so I played the game for one in-game year for this video, so that's what my opinion will be based upon. The game starts with a short story about how your grandpa dies, but it gives you a letter that you don't open until 20 years later while you're working some dead-end office job. Or at least, I assume he died. I may or may not have found something near the end of the game where it seemed to have some sort of hints that he's returning on year 3 or something. But the letter, I presume, gives you the deed to some farmland that your grandpa owned, but I actually missed the little arrow at the bottom indicating that there was more to read and went right to the X to close the letter. I actually didn't even realize I missed that until making this video. When you get to the farm, you're introduced to a few of the locals and what hell? Doesn't look like farm life's gonna be that tough after all. We also meet the mayor who walks out of the studio apartment that I loosely call a home. The first morning I woke up with this package in the middle of the room that I tried to open by chopping it with a pickaxe, and I was incompetent enough to not even consider using right click. I didn't actually figure out how to open the package until day 4. My goodness, how do I trust myself in the morning without breaking something? But here we are at the farm, and I'm going to be splitting this video into the main features of the game as far as I understand them, and those would be farming, the mines, and relationships. Let's start with the place where you'll be spending, or I guess I will be spending, most of my time, and that is the farm. At the beginning, you're thrown into a mess of a property, and it's my responsibility to clear all of it out because Grandpa left it behind and nobody was taking care of it. I spent the first several days doing almost nothing but this. It's slow, monotonous, and burns through energy like nobody's business, so I typically went to bed around 2 to 3 p.m., well, in-game. This always felt like a waste to me because I wanted to live each day to its fullest, so I quit and uninstalled now. It had me wondering if there was some way to increase my energy, but I wasn't able to find anything that would do it for quite a while. With the time that I did have, I slowly chopped down trees, mowed the lawn, and broke rocks. It was an exciting existence, but I was hopeful that once I got the farm going, things would start to get more interesting. When I did discover the free seeds gifted to me, I planted them and got everything officially going. Thing is, I actually only watered the seeds once. For the longest time, I was wondering why I didn't have any fully grown plants yet. I figured that after a week or so of in-game time passing, I would have had crops at this point. The seeds had even turned green, so I thought they were growing. It wasn't until day 14 that I discovered you actually have to water the plants every single day. I've never played a farming simulator before. I'm so used to games with farming systems where you only have to water plants once or not at all. And since the plants I did have did grow at least a little, I didn't think I was doing anything wrong until 2 weeks had passed and I think somebody in chat told me to water them. It was only after all of this that I realized the only reason they had grown even just a little bit was because of a rainy day or two I had already had. This first season, spring, which I thought was actually summer, was quite the learning experience. I slowly expanded my farm, and the more I expanded, the more time it burned just to ensure all the plants were watered. So the more I grew, the less I could engage with anything else. It was pretty, well, disinteresting. I could potentially have saved just enough energy to walk around normally and have done other things, but I wanted to expand and clean up the farm, so I rushed to bed most days. In the end, not much happened to the farm during the first season. I was just cleaning and planting. I did get a chicken coop, but it wasn't until summer before I got any chickens. The summer morning was also quite the rude awakening because all my spring plants had dried up and withered. I thought something like this might happen, but I wasn't entirely sure. I also hadn't learned to read the seed descriptions before this moment because I just wanted to plant literally anything after failing to learn how to grow anything until halfway through the month. Summer was my chance to apply some of the lessons I had learned in my farming ventures. Only problem was that I had literally no money. And this was a problem for the entirety of spring and summer, and to an extent, fall. My bad start and failing to plant any of these money crops for the first 2 weeks set me back quite a bit, so I was only able to afford a few plants from the shop. I hardly restocked half of what I had before, but I suppose it was at least something. As the season went on, I gradually grew the farmer larger and larger until at last it was larger than it had been during spring. This was great. I had figured out a pattern that allowed me to get enough money to buy more seeds and thus reinvest in the farm. I also tried to remember to feed my chickens, but quite often failed to remember they were hiding away in their little coop. There was even a point I considered not feeding them just to see what would happen. They are relatively low maintenance, but the eggs they produce sell for so little that the little amounts of work they require didn't seem immediately important to me. I didn't experiment with not feeding the chickens, so I don't know what would happen if I did withhold food for long enough, but there was always that dark desire inside my heart, wondering if the chickens would die in this game. In some ways, Stardew Valley sticks to some amount of realism, but obviously it's a video game and it's got this real upbeat and casual atmosphere, so I suspected they wouldn't do something like allow death, but I don't know because I decided to be a nice guy. Summer is also where I could finally expand the house into a slightly larger studio apartment. Now I got a kitchen, and now I got to think, if I didn't have a kitchen before, let alone a microwave, where did I eat? Or am I some ultra powerful entity who can sleep for his sustenance? Whether I am or not, the plants need water to grow, but you can speed up this process with speed grow, or as I like to call it, plant steroids. If you can't tell, I really enjoy speed grow. There are other soil improvement things that have different effects, but the only ones I remember are speed grow, one that gives a chance for a soil square to still be watered in the morning, and another that increases the quality of the plants when they do grow. Though someone from chat said that the speed grow I had during the summer was only the tier 1 speed grow that increased plants growth rates by 10%, which for some of them wasn't even a full day. So I think I bit the placebo a little hard with this stuff. But of course, if there's a tier 1, then there's gotta be higher tiers. I just couldn't get my hands on any of that stuff for the entirety of the run. I could have made some tier 3 speed grow in winter, but I don't think it works in winter. Another thing about summer is that I really loved wheat and corn. Both of these can survive the fall and summer, and wheat is dirt cheap. So for this reason, I poured most of my money into these seeds, so I wouldn't have to deal with another lost harvest like I had during the spring. Part of me hates this and part of me likes it. It does at least add something I have to keep track of and requires some brain power. I guess the only reason I don't like it was because the end of the months felt like a waste, as I had to burn several days with not planting anything new, or else they'd just be destroyed. I don't think a grace period would have helped, and with some planning it wasn't that big of a deal, but sometimes in the morning you discovered that some of your tilled soil was destroyed, and if you upgraded that soil, then you'd just lose it. The only way to protect the soil was to have a plant, so the end of the month was a debate of what was more valuable to me, the plants or the soil upgrade. And during these early seasons in particular, money was so tight that this decision was difficult to make. When fall came along, I was a bit thrown off because of the pink or purple or fuchsia trees. Why are they this color? It looks like cotton candy I can chomp on. That aside, fall was the season I finally thought I had a grasp on the farming system, as well as enough money to fund the first plants of the season. That, on top of the fact I was able to hold on to the super cheap wheat and corn, allowed this to be a boom season. And I got to say, it felt good. I invested into pumpkins for the season, and those things take forever to grow, but sell for more than my mortgage. Other than that, there isn't much to say. I was the farmer man doing farmer things on the farm. I finally was making the riches I had always dreamed of, and when winter was approaching, I figured I'd give up on preserving any of the soil, figuring it'd just get destroyed with the snow. I also had a barn built and got a few cows, figuring animal products would be all I could sell. The savings I had accumulated were actually feeling a little lackluster now, despite having way more than I ever have, because I was concerned there'd be no way to recoup what I spent in the winter. When winter did come, sure enough, my plants were destroyed, and I never found a snow yam from foraging, which is required to craft this season's seeds. I guess I left that out, but each season a different assortment of 3 or 4 plants grow, and you can find them, and sometimes there would be one I could never find until sometime late, and because I couldn't find it, I wasn't able to make the seeds for that season. I was able to for each of them, but sometimes it just took longer than I feel was necessary. It wasn't until about halfway through winter, when I decided to just whack some worms with a hoe, that I finally got the snow yams I was looking for. I don't get it, but I guess I'll take it. The winter season as a whole was a little weird because now I couldn't farm. It looks like there's a greenhouse that can be rebuilt somehow. I presume it's tied to the community center or something. But on the bright side, this meant I could spend more time decorating the farm and even tore down what I had previously built and rebuilt a more efficient one. I was able to focus on the animals and became more acquainted with how they worked, which was nice. I just don't know how I'd like to have to deal with these animals and plants at the same time. But I don't have to worry about that now because it's winter. And I guess I should explain the community center real quick. The mayor early in the game introduces me to this rundown community center, and I guess the people of this town are motivated enough to fix it. So instead, it's all up to me, the new guy, getting highly specific items, which I can then hand over to these magical apples that will then repair the community center for me. Some of the things I need are easy to get, while others are a bit more elusive. This is, as far as I'm concerned, the only physical sign of progression in the game. I guess you do level up different things, and some people consider upgrading tools progression, but I don't, so this is it. I suppose there is one other thing that can be considered progression, and that is getting deeper into the mines. The mines were my big hope in this game. I desperately wanted the exploration and combat here to help give me a little something different that was engaging enough to break up the monotony of farming. So let's see how or if it managed to accomplish this great feat. The start of my time in the mines in the first level was just a bunch of rocks I started breaking, hoping something would happen. Sure enough, a ladder appeared from under one of the rocks and I was brought into a room with a few enemies to slay. I wasn't super stoked because I had this terrible broken sword, but we are just getting started. My first impressions of the mines as a whole was that it took a hot second to kill slimes and I was burning energy like no tomorrow. This would become more of a thing the more that I mined, but there was also some times that I'd fly through several layers of the cave system and other times where I'd be mining every single rock in a room until all my energy was gone just to get the ladder and get down one layer. The RNG can be crazy sometimes. At first, it was a nice break from farming, but it did mean at the same time that it was hard to spend time on the farm without burning all my energy. There was definitely a balancing act, and surprise of surprises, that is definitely intended. So as much as I sort of enjoyed running around in these caves, there wasn't a whole lot to be gained other than the precious metals and the occasional treasure chest. Most of my time down here was spent going by layers of 5 because there's an elevator thingy every 5 levels, which is very handy. The only times I could do more than that was when there was a rainy day. This game taught me so much love for the rain because it meant I could spend so much more time in the mines. At some points, I reached a level 30, and the caves were no longer the normal kind I had grown accustomed to, but thankfully, I had found a new, better sword in level 20. These new dark caves ended really quickly with a mere 10 more levels where I found myself in an icy area. There was also this nice slingshot right before I went down into the ice, and it said it requires stone to shoot, and I had all this stone in my inventory, but it wouldn't shoot anything. This was the first time I had come across something like this, and I had no idea I needed to take the rocks in my inventory, click on them, and then click on the slingshot. I've grown so accustomed to ammunition just being something you passively use so long as it's in your inventory. So this threw me for a loop, and it took forever to discover how it works. Though I never actually did use the slingshot in the caves, though that would have been real nice. It would have been particularly nice in this one room that I got to very soon after I got it, and it was loaded with enemies. I came really close to beating all the enemies down here with my measly little sword, but eventually I ran out of health for the first time in the caves, and that was quite the moment. I didn't know what to expect, so when I woke up on the surface, I was wondering what I might have lost, because there's no way I'd be able to die without punishment, right? When the window appeared, I was a bit unfazed, thinking I hadn't lost anything big, but I once again missed the arrow indicating that there were more items I had lost. So I opened my inventory and my heart skipped a beat because I had lost my sword, my only good sword, and it already wasn't even that good for fighting enemies in the layers I was in. Without that sword, there wasn't any way I could continue to explore the mines. The only thing I could think of was trying to buy a sword from the guy in the house near the mines, but then I discovered he had an item recovery option, and sure enough, I was able to get my sword back on the cheap. As far as I'm aware, he'll only recover one thing. I don't think I ever needed to get more than one, but that was nice, being able to get my sword back. There were several more biome areas in the caves, and there were several different enemy varieties. Most of them amounted to nothing more than walking towards you until they bump into you and kill you. A few shoot projectiles, or maybe just one or two, but the enemy variety only makes a slight difference in the AI appearance and health. Finally, at the bottom of the cave, there was a skeleton key, but I never figured out what it unlocked. I actually looked it up, and apparently it's used in the desert, but I never got to the desert, and I didn't know it existed because I never got the bus working. I presume it'd get fixed if I completed something in the community center, but I never completed the one that fixes the bus, so I never got to the desert. I did complete a few of the rooms though, and it's very handy when you do. There's these individual packages that are fine, but once you finish an entire room, the apples will come and surround and devour you. I mean, they'll build something that's actually really nice. I got a minecart track system and a bridge leading to a quarry, and both of those were great. And finally, let's talk about the social aspect of this game. Now, as someone who doesn't care about story, I also don't particularly care about the relationships between characters and games. There aren't any situations I recall where I did actually care about a video game character, though admittedly, it's most likely my own fault for not paying attention to the story that would give me a reason to care. But Stardew Valley is a social game, not a narrative one, and for the sake of giving the game a fair shake, I tried to grow my relationship status with the NPCs. Although, for a while, I couldn't figure out how to gift anything to anyone or how to increase the relationship. There was an icon for gifting in the relationships list thing, but I didn't know how to actually give them out. It wasn't until at one point I was trying to complete a quest and I couldn't figure out how to give this guy the items he wanted until I happened to be holding the item near him when a gift icon appeared and, well, I figured it out. In hindsight, this is pretty simple, but it hadn't even occurred to me to try that in the moment. At least I was able to increase my relationship status with someone, but that was with Grandpa. I need to be focusing on the single ladies. Thing is though, the gifts I gave never really seemed to increase the relationship status that much. Even when they said they liked the gift, it wasn't all that helpful. It did make a difference, but not much of one. I did at one point even give a diamond to the blonde, no, I don't remember her name, and it didn't even make much of a difference. Of all the NPCs, I would have thought a diamond would mean marriage on the spot with her. Worse yet, the lady I decided I wanted to set my sights upon was Leia. Only problem was, for the entire first half of the game, I couldn't find her, no matter how hard I tried. I just never ran into her. I did figure out where she lived, but she kept the door locked for some reason, so I couldn't burst in. I did find that doing quests for the NPCs was the best way to increase my relationship with them, but the fisherman felt like he was dishing out half of the quest, and I'm not interested in fishing, Willie. You can also give a gift the character likes on their birthday, and that can really help. I more or less accidentally got 3 hearts of relationship status with the wizard because I happened to give him something he liked on his birthday. And with some guidance from chat, I did the same with Leia, but that wasn't until near the end of the year, so no marriage for me. The gifts were also a little tough to figure out. I presume you could talk to them regularly without giving them a gift to determine what they might like, but I preferred playing gifting roulette, randomly giving gifts and guessing and hoping that they would like what I gave them, though flowers and plants were usually a good first guess, and sticking with them was a safe bet. Maybe if I had been more bold with the gifts, I could have found stuff that increased the hearts faster, but that's fine. There were also rare circumstances when I was given a way to actually interact with the NPCs in the sense that I got dialogue boxes to choose from. The first time this happened, I was paralyzed with indecision. These were actually the most stressful parts of playing the game because I was trying to build a better relationship with these characters, but I knew answering wrong would harm it, and answering right could really boost it. But no matter what I answered, I never seemed to get quite the best one. What do you want me to say? I also wanted to quickly mention the different events or festivals that they got. The first one was some sort of dance where I got rejected by literally every woman and man in the entire town because I hadn't figured out how to get any hearts yet. I was also stuck for a while because the one and only guy I hadn't talked to was the one and only who started the event. The second one was this communal soup thing, which just sounds so unsanitary, and I was supposed to add something good. I didn't bring anything with me, so I threw in a sweet pea, and then everybody hated the soup. Nobody knew it was me, but I poisoned the entire village that day and officially became a public menace. There was this weird one with jellyfish and my personal favorite, the Stardew Valley Fair, that has mini games, and I rocked the target practice one and spent enough time on it to get this thing called a star drop, and after eating it, I gained some energy permanently, but it also filled my mind with thoughts of Terraria that made my jaw drop to the floor. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of this video, I have a Terraria channel, and I knew Stardew Valley and Terraria had some crossover, but it hadn't even occurred to me to look for one. So that was awesome. I also posted today a video of my experience on Stardew Valley over on the main channel, Thorbin, and it'll go more comprehensively through the steps in my journey as opposed to my overall thoughts, in case that interests you. As for the events, there was also a Halloween-themed one, an ice fishing one that I dominated, and a Christmas one. So what was my overall feeling towards this beloved indie game? Did it change my mind forever on these farming, relaxing, peaceful games? Well, if I had to give it a score, and remember, I'm not trying to look at this game objectively in any way, it's just based on my own personal enjoyment of it. But if I had to give it a score, it would be a 4 out of 10. The whole experience was nothing more than a chore simulator, and the focus of the game was to get better at doing those chores. I understand the market for these games and why there's a lot of people who enjoy them. Sometimes you do want to sit back and do something that's peaceful and nice. Some people unwind that way. Me? I unwind by slaughtering my enemies. And if I really want to relax, then I'll bump the difficulty down and go on a power trip. So from the get-go, I was fairly certain Stardew Valley wasn't for me, and after playing it, I can certainly say it's not. Maybe I would learn to like it after spending more time with it, but I have a hard time seeing that since the core gameplay loop is what I don't enjoy. There isn't really much of any exploration, and combat is simple at best, and those are two of my favorite things to do in games. Stardew Valley definitely deserves the love it gets, and I'd never tell anyone not to play it, and would never say it's a bad game, but in the end, it's just not for me.